4 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel Emma Blackwood was the deadliest sniper instructor at Fort Bragg. One training accident changed everything. Now, when an elite Army Rangers unit is trapped behind enemy lines with a legendary sniper hunting them one by one, there's only one person who can make the impossible shot. But Emma Phantom Blackwood has sworn never to hold a rifle again. What will it take to bring the ghost back to life? And what dark secret lies behind the mission that destroyed her career? This is the story of redemption, brotherhood, and the longest shot ever attempted. Like and subscribe for more incredible military stories that honor our heroes. I won't miss this time. Army snipers' deadly return to save her brothers. The morning mist hung over Fort Bragg like a shroud, and Lieutenant Colonel Emma Blackwood could taste the metallic tang of dew on her lips as she adjusted the scope on her Barrett M82A1. The rifle felt like an extension of her soul, 50 pounds of precision engineering that had made her legend in the Army Ranger sniper program. At 28, she was the youngest woman ever to hold the position of chief sniper instructor, and her students called her Phantom for the way she seemed to materialize from nowhere to correct their form or deliver a perfect shot from an impossible angle. Distance to target 1,200 meters, she announced to the group of Ranger candidates lying prone beside her on the firing line. Wind speed 8 miles per hour from the northeast. Atmospheric pressure 30.15 inches of mercury. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Who can tell me the ballistic solution? Ranger candidate Jake Morrison, 23 years old and eager to prove himself worthy of the tab, raised his hand without lifting his eye from his scope. Jake was the son of a Medal of Honor recipient killed in action in Iraq when Jake was 15. The young man carried that legacy like a weight on his shoulders, training harder than anyone else, pushing himself to excel in every phase of the program. Ma'am, with the M118LR round, we're looking at approximately 4.8 seconds of flight time, requiring elevation adjustment of 18.2 minutes of angle, with a windage correction of 2.1 MOA left to compensate for the crosswind component. Emma Martinino nodded approvingly. Outstanding, Morrison. Your father would be proud of that calculation. Now let's see if you can execute it. The range at Fort Bragg was designed to test snipers under the most challenging conditions the Army could simulate. Targets positioned at extreme distances, environmental factors that changed hourly, and the constant pressure of knowing that a single mistake in combat would mean the death of fellow soldiers. Emma had been perfecting this training regimen for 3 years, ever since she had taken over the program from Colonel James Harrison, the man who had discovered her talent and mentored her through the early years of her career. Harrison stood behind the firing line, now his weathered face impassive as he observed the training exercise. At 55, he had more combat deployments than any other soldier on the base, and his presence lent gravity to every lesson. Emma had learned more about leadership from watching Harrison than from any textbook or classroom lecture. Phantom, Harrison said quietly, using the call sign that had followed her from her operational days. This batch of candidates is showing exceptional promise, particularly Morrison. Emma studied Jake through her binoculars as he made final adjustments to his rifle. There was something in his posture, a tension that went beyond normal pre-shot concentration. She had seen it before in soldiers who were carrying emotional baggage into the field, and it worried her. He's trying too hard, she replied, carrying his father's legacy like it's a 100-pound pack. That kind of pressure can make a good soldier great, or it can get him killed. Sounds familiar, Harrison observed with a slight smile. Remind you of anyone? Emma knew he was talking about her own journey to this position. She had enlisted at 18 after her older brother died in Afghanistan, carrying her own legacy of grief and determination. The difference was that she had learned to channel that emotion into cold mechanical precision. Jake Morrison was still fighting his demons instead of embracing them. Morrison, you're cleared to engage, Emma called out. Jake controlled his breathing, settling into the natural respiratory pause that every precision shooter learned to find. The Barrett's trigger broke cleanly, and the massive rifle bucked against his shoulder with a thunderous roar that echoed across the range. Downrange, the steel target remained untouched. Miss, the range officer announced. No impact observed. Emma frowned and raised her binoculars. At this distance, even a small error in calculation or execution could result in a complete miss. But Jake's fundamentals were solid. She had watched him make similar shots consistently over the past 2 weeks of training. Morrison, run your calculations again, she ordered. Something's not right. But as Jake worked through the ballistic equation a second time, Emma noticed something that made her blood run cold. The wind flags along the range were showing a consistent 8-mile-per-hour northeast breeze, exactly what they had calculated for. But the grass near the target area was moving differently, indicating a localized wind pattern that their instruments hadn't detected. "Check the wind at the target," she called to the range officer. The reply came back 30 seconds later. "Wind at target area is gusting to 15 miles per hour variable direction. Localized weather pattern moving through the valley." Emma cursed under her breath. The environmental conditions had changed between the time they had taken their readings and the time Jake had fired. In combat, such variables were constant, but in training they usually tried to maintain consistent conditions to build confidence and technique. Morrison adjusted for the new wind reading and engage again. Jake's second shot was perfect. The 750-grain bullet struck the steel target dead center, the impact visible, even at 1,200 meters, as a shower of sparks and paint chips. The candidates around him cheered, but Emma noticed that Jake seemed more relieved than proud. That should have been the end of the exercise. Instead, it was the beginning of the worst day of Emma's military career. Colonel Harrison approached the firing line with a concerned expression. "Phantom, we've got a situation developing. Got a call from JSOC 15 minutes ago. There's been an incident in Afghanistan, and they need an emergency consultation from our best instructor." Emma lowered her binoculars. Joint Special Operations Command didn't make casual requests for training personnel. If they were calling Fort Bragg directly, something had gone seriously wrong, downrange. "What kind of incident?" "Sniper team got compromised during a high-value target mission. 3 KIA, 2 wounded, and the Taliban have brought in a counter-sniper specialist. Our guys are pinned down in a compound with no way to evacuate. They need someone who can walk their remaining sniper through a shot he's never attempted before." Emma felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with operational stress. She had been out of active deployment rotation for 2 years, focused entirely on training the next generation of snipers. But her reputation in the special operations community was built on exactly this kind of impossible shot under impossible circumstances. "How long do I have to prep?" "Satellite link goes live in 30 minutes. You'll be talking directly to Staff Sergeant Martinez, the surviving sniper. He's good, but he's never attempted a target at the range and environmental conditions they're facing." Emma nodded and began gathering her equipment. But as she prepared to head to the communications center, she heard Jake Morrison calling her name. "Ma'am, request permission to observe the consultation." She turned to face the young Ranger candidate. "Morrison, this is operational intelligence. You don't have clearance for what?" "Ma'am, my father served with Martinez in Iraq. If there's anything I can do to help, anything I can learn that might save lives, I want to be there." Emma looked at Harrison, who shrugged slightly. In normal circumstances, she would have refused without hesitation. Operational security protocols were clear about who could and couldn't participate in active mission support. But something in Jake's expression reminded her of herself at that age, desperate to prove worthy of the uniform and the responsibility it carried. "You can observe," she said finally, "but you keep your mouth shut and your hands off anything classified." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am, understood." The communications center at Fort Bragg was a windowless room filled with satellite equipment and secure terminals that could connect to any military unit anywhere in the world. When Emma arrived, the technicians had already established the link with the compound in Afghanistan, where Staff Sergeant Martinez and his team were trapped. The situation was worse than Harrison had described. Martinez's voice crackled through the satellite connection, exhaustion and stress evident in every word. His team had been conducting surveillance on a Taliban commander when they were ambushed by a force that had been waiting for them. The enemy had brought in a sniper who had already killed 3 Americans and wounded 2 others. Martinez was the only effective shooter left, and he was facing a shot that pushed the limits of both his equipment and his training. "Range to target is 2,100 meters, Martinez reported. "Target is a shooter positioned in a minaret approximately 60 meters above ground level. I've got a clear line of sight, but the atmospheric conditions are challenging. Temperature is 108 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity near zero, and there's a variable crosswind that's been gusting between 10 and 25 miles per hour." Emma studied the data on her screen, running the ballistic calculations in her head. A 2,100-meter shot in desert conditions with variable wind was at the extreme edge of what the M2010 enhanced sniper rifle could achieve. The margin for error was essentially zero. Martinez, what's your ammunition status? I've got 8 rounds left of M118LR. Used most of my load during the initial contact. 8 rounds against a target that would require multiple shots to range and adjust for the environmental conditions. Emma realized that Martinez would probably get 2, maybe 3 attempts before he ran out of ammunition and lost his ability to suppress the enemy sniper. Copy that. Stand by while I run the ballistic solution. Emma pulled out her ballistic calculator and began inputting the environmental data. But as she worked, she became aware of Jake Morrison leaning forward in his chair, studying the information on the screens with intense concentration. "Morrison," she said quietly, "what did I tell you about keeping quiet?" "Ma'am, I think I see something," Jake replied. "The wind data from Martinez's position doesn't match the atmospheric patterns we would expect for that region and time of day." Emma paused her calculations. Jake was right. The meteorological data they were receiving from Afghanistan showed wind patterns that were inconsistent with what she knew about desert atmospheric conditions during the heat of the day. "Martinez, I need you to confirm your wind readings," she called into the radio. "Are you using mechanical wind indicators or electronic sensors?" "We lost our electronic equipment in the initial attack. I'm reading wind speed and direction based on visual indicators." That was the problem. Visual wind indicators worked well at the shooter's position, but they couldn't account for atmospheric conditions along the entire flight path of the bullet. At 2,100 meters, the projectile would travel through multiple wind layers, each potentially affecting its trajectory. Emma made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. "Morrison, you have been studying atmospheric physics as part of your advanced marksmanship training. What's your assessment of the wind conditions between Martinez's position and the target?" Jake studied the topographical data displayed on the screens. The compound where Martinez was positioned sat in a valley while the target minaret was on elevated ground. The bullet would have to travel through a complex pattern of thermal currents and wind shears that could deflect it significantly from its intended path. "Ma'am, based on the terrain and the time of day, I think Martinez is dealing with thermal updrafts from the valley floor that will affect the bullet's trajectory in the vertical plane. The crosswind component is variable, but the thermal effects might be more significant than the horizontal wind drift." Emma considered Jake's analysis. It was sophisticated thinking for a Ranger candidate, but it was also speculative. They were basing a life-or-death decision on theoretical atmospheric physics rather than hard data. But they were running out of time. Through the radio, she could hear Martinez reporting that the enemy sniper had resumed firing, pinning down the wounded Americans and preventing any possibility of evacuation. "Martinez, we're going to give you a firing solution based on thermal atmospheric modeling. Your primary adjustment should be for vertical deflection rather than horizontal wind drift." Emma provided Martinez with the calculations incorporating Jake's assessment of the thermal conditions. The adjustments were significant, requiring Martinez to aim several feet above where conventional ballistic tables would indicate. "Copy your solution, Phantom. Engaging now." The satellite connection carried the sound of Martinez's rifle firing, followed by a long silence. Emma held her breath, waiting for the impact report. Miss Martinez finally reported, "No observed impact on target." Emma felt her heart sink. She had given Martinez firing instructions that had consumed one of his precious remaining rounds and yielded nothing. Worse, the enemy sniper was still active, still threatening Martinez's wounded teammates. "Martinez, stand by for corrected solution." But as Emma began recalculating the ballistic data, Jake Morrison spoke up again. "Ma'am, I think the problem is that we're trying to compensate for too many variables. In these conditions, maybe we should simplify the shot." "What do you mean?" "Instead of trying to thread the needle through all the atmospheric effects, what if Martinez waits for a weather window? The thermal currents should calm down as the sun gets lower. If he can hold position for another hour, the shot becomes much more manageable." Emma understood Jake's logic, but she also understood combat reality. Martinez and his team were under enemy fire with wounded soldiers bleeding out. They didn't have the luxury of waiting for perfect shooting conditions. "Negative, Morrison. We don't have time to wait for environmental changes. Martinez needs to take this shot now." Emma provided Martinez with a corrected firing solution, adjusting for the missed data from his first attempt. This time, she incorporated more conservative estimates of the atmospheric effects, trusting her experience over Jake's theoretical analysis. Martinez's second shot was closer, but still missed the target. Through the radio, they could hear the intensity of the enemy fire increasing. The Taliban sniper knew he was being engaged and was pressing his attack on the trapped Americans. "Phantom, I've got 2 guys bleeding out down here." Martinez transmitted, his voice tight with stress. "I need to make something happen fast." Emma looked at the ballistic data on her screen, then at Jake Morrison's concerned face. The young Ranger candidate was clearly struggling with the same doubts that were plaguing her. They were providing life-or-death guidance to a soldier in combat, and they were failing. "Martinez, one more adjustment," Emma transmitted. "I want you to aim for the base of the minaret instead of the sniper position. Force him to move, and we'll walk you onto the target." It was a reasonable tactical adjustment. Even if Martinez couldn't hit the enemy sniper directly, he could force him to reposition, potentially giving the trapped Americans a chance to move or evacuate their wounded. Martinez fired his third shot, and this time the impact was visible. The bullet struck the minaret approximately 10 feet below the sniper position, sending a shower of concrete and dust into the air. The enemy fire stopped immediately. "Target is moving," Martinez reported. "I can see him repositioning to a secondary position on the north side of the minaret." Emma quickly calculated a new firing solution for the sniper's new position. But as she worked, she noticed Jake Morrison shaking his head. "Ma'am, I think Martinez should hold his fire. If the enemy sniper is moving, this might be the opportunity for the wounded soldiers to be evacuated." Emma paused. Jake's tactical assessment was sound. Sometimes the best sniper shot was the one not taken if it achieved the mission objective without expending ammunition. But before she could respond, Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. "Phantom enemy sniper is back in position and engaging. I'm taking the shot." Martinez fired without waiting for Emma's firing solution. The shot was rushed, taken under pressure, and it missed completely. Worse, the enemy sniper immediately returned fire, and Emma heard Martinez scream over the radio, "I'm hit! I'm hit!" The satellite connection dissolved into chaos. Other voices came through the transmission, Martinez's teammates trying to treat his wounds while still under enemy fire. Emma listened in horror as the situation deteriorated rapidly. When the communication finally stabilized, it was a different voice on the radio. Lieutenant Walsh, Martinez's team leader, was now the primary contact. "Phantom, Martinez took a round through the shoulder. He's alive but unable to engage. We've got no effective sniper capability remaining." Emma felt the weight of failure crushing down on her chest. The guidance she had provided, based partly on Jake Morrison's theoretical analysis, had led to Martinez taking a desperate shot that had exposed him to enemy fire. A good soldier was wounded, possibly crippled, because of her decisions. "Walsh, what's your status on casualties and ammunition?" "2 KIA, 3 wounded, including Martinez. We're low on everything, and the enemy sniper is still active. We need immediate air support or we're not making it out of here." Harrison stepped up to the radio. "Walsh, this is Colonel Harrison at Fort Bragg. Air support is en route to your position. ETA 15 minutes. Find cover and hold your position." The satellite connection ended, and Emma found herself staring at the now silent radio equipment. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of training exercises continuing on the base. "Phantom," Harrison said quietly, "it wasn't your fault. You did everything right given the information available." But Emma knew better. She had allowed an untrained Ranger candidate to influence her tactical decisions during an active combat operation. She had second-guessed her own experience in favor of Jake Morrison's theoretical analysis. And a good soldier had paid the price for her poor judgment. "Colonel, I need to speak with you privately." Harrison nodded to the communications technicians who left the room. When they were alone, Emma faced the man who had been her mentor and father figure for 5 years. "I compromise operational security by allowing Morrison to participate in the consultation. I allowed his input to influence my ballistic calculations, and I provided guidance that led directly to Martinez being wounded." Harrison studied her face carefully. "Emma, combat operations involve uncertainty and risk. You can't predict every variable or control every outcome. I can control my own decision-making process, and I failed to maintain proper discipline during a critical operation." Before Harrison could respond, there was a knock at the door. Jake Morrison entered, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something," he began. "I think I made a mistake in my atmospheric analysis. I was looking at the topographical data wrong, and I think the thermal effect calculations I suggested were incorrect." Emma felt something cold and heavy settle in her stomach. She had suspected that Jake's analysis was speculative, but she had allowed it to influence her guidance anyway. What kind of mistake? I was reading the elevation data in meters instead of feet. The thermal column effects I calculated were based on the wrong vertical distances. If Martinez had followed conventional ballistic tables instead of my modifications, his first shot probably would have been on target. Emma closed her eyes and felt the weight of complete professional failure. She had allowed a student's error to influence combat operations, and that error had potentially cost American lives. Morrison, you're dismissed from this training cycle. Report to your company commander for reassignment. Ma'am, please. You're dismissed, Candidate Morrison. That's a direct order. Jake Morrison left the room, and Emma found herself alone with Colonel Harrison. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications that neither wanted to address directly. What do you want me to do, Phantom? Harrison asked finally. Emma unclipped her instructor badge from her uniform and placed it on the table next to the radio equipment. I want you to relieve me of my position and recommend disciplinary action for compromising operational security and contributing to the injury of a deployed soldier. Emma, think about what you're saying. You're the best sniper instructor this program has ever had. One difficult operation doesn't erase 5 years of excellence. One operation is all it takes to get good people killed, Colonel. I failed in my judgment, and I can't trust myself to make the right decisions under pressure anymore. Emma walked toward the door, but Harrison called her back. If you leave this program, who's going to train the next generation of snipers? Who's going to make sure they're ready for the impossible shots and the life-or-death decisions? Emma paused without turning around. Someone who won't let their ego and their desire to mentor override their professional judgment. Someone better than me. She left the communications center and walked across Fort Bragg in the fading afternoon light. The base was alive with the sounds of training exercises in military vehicles, the constant preparation for combat that defined life in the Army Rangers. But Emma felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching from outside a world she no longer belonged to. In her quarters, she began packing her personal belongings. The Army would conduct an investigation into the incident, and while she probably wouldn't face criminal charges, her career as a sniper instructor was effectively over. The loss of confidence she felt in her own judgment was too complete to overcome. Her phone rang at 2147 hours. The caller ID showed Colonel Harrison's number. Emma, I just got word from Afghanistan. Martinez is going to be okay. The shoulder wound was clean, no permanent damage, and the air support reached his team in time. They're all coming home. Emma felt a measure of relief, but it didn't change the fundamental reality of what had happened. That's good news, Colonel, but it doesn't change the fact that I compromised operational discipline. There's something else, Harrison continued. I talked to Martinez during his medical evacuation. He said the guidance you provided was the best sniper instruction he had ever received. He said he learned more in 30 minutes talking to you than he had in 6 months of training. Colonel, he also said that Jake Morrison's atmospheric analysis was actually correct. Martinez had been misreading his own environmental indicators. The thermal effects were exactly what Morrison predicted, but Martinez didn't properly implement the corrections you provided. Emma sat down heavily on her bed. What are you saying? I'm saying that your instruction was sound, your tactical decisions were appropriate, and you probably saved lives even though things didn't go according to plan. The problem wasn't your judgment, Emma. The problem was that combat is unpredictable and soldiers make mistakes under pressure. Emma absorbed this information, but it didn't change her fundamental assessment of her own performance. She had allowed training protocols to be compromised, and that compromise had contributed to a dangerous situation. Whether the outcome was good or bad didn't alter the fact that she had failed to maintain proper discipline. Colonel, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but my decision stands. I can't continue as an instructor if I don't trust my own judgment. Harrison was quiet for several long moments. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 25 years of military leadership. Emma, I've seen a lot of good soldiers destroy themselves over single incidents that they couldn't let go of. Don't be one of them. Take some time, think about it, and remember that the Army needs people who care enough about their responsibilities to question themselves. The phone call ended, and Emma continued packing. 3 days later, she submitted her resignation from the sniper instructor program and requested transfer to a non-combat position. The Army, recognizing her value and hoping she would reconsider, assigned her to a training development role at Fort Gordon, Georgia. But Emma never returned to operational instruction. She completed her military obligation in administrative positions, then left the Army entirely when her contract expired. The woman who had been called Phantom, who had trained dozens of snipers and saved countless lives through her instruction, disappeared into civilian life as if she had never existed. 4 years later, Emma Blackwood worked as a security consultant in Atlanta, using her military experience to help corporations protect their assets and executives. She lived alone in a small apartment, kept her weapon skills sharp at local shooting ranges, and tried not to think about the life she had abandoned at Fort Bragg. She had convinced herself that she was content with this quiet, safe existence. She had no way of knowing that the past was about to catch up with her in the most dramatic way possible, or that the skills she had sworn never to use in combat again would soon be the only thing standing between life and death for soldiers who needed a miracle. The phone call that would change everything came on a Tuesday morning in October, when the autumn air in Atlanta carried the scent of dying leaves and the promise of winter. Emma was reviewing security protocols for a pharmaceutical company when her phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in 4 years. Fort Bragg, Colonel Harrison. She stared at the phone for 3 rings before answering. "This is Emma." "Phantom," Harrison's voice was tight with urgency. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. We've got a situation developing in Afghanistan, and you're the only person who can help." Emma felt her chest tighten with familiar anxiety. "Colonel, I'm not in the Army anymore. I can't. 8 Army Rangers are trapped behind enemy lines. They're being hunted by a sniper who's already killed 4 Americans and wounded 3 others. The survivor is Jake Morrison." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Jake Morrison, the Ranger candidate whose theoretical analysis had contributed to the incident that ended her military career. The young man she had dismissed from training in anger and guilt. How is that possible? Morrison was dropped from the program. He recycled through a different training company, graduated and deployed 6 months ago. Emma, he's trapped in a compound with no way out, and the enemy sniper is systematically eliminating his team. We need someone who can guide him through a counter-sniper operation. Emma closed her eyes and saw Jake Morrison's face from 4 years ago, pale and shaking, as he confessed his mistake in the atmospheric calculations. She had blamed him for her own failure of judgment, had ended his dream of becoming a Ranger, because she needed someone to be responsible for the incident. Now he was dying in Afghanistan, and she was the only person who could save him. "Colonel, I can't. I don't trust my own judgment anymore. What if I make another mistake?" "Emma," Harrison's voice was gentle but firm. "Jake Morrison is 27 years old. He's got a wife and a daughter he's never met. She was born 3 weeks ago while he was deployed. If you don't help him, that little girl's going to grow up without a father." Emma felt the weight of 4 years of guilt and self-doubt crushing down on her chest. She had spent all this time trying to forget her past, trying to convince herself that she was better off in civilian life. But the truth was that she had been running from responsibility, not toward a better future. "What do you need me to do?" "Get to Fort Bragg as fast as you can. We've got a helicopter waiting to take you to a forward operating base in Afghanistan. You'll be providing direct tactical support to Morrison and his team." Emma looked around her quiet office with its civilian concerns and safe, predictable problems. Then she thought about Jake Morrison trapped behind enemy lines with a wife and baby daughter waiting for him to come home. "I'll be there in 4 hours." As Emma drove toward Fort Bragg through the Georgia countryside, she tried to prepare herself mentally for what lay ahead. She would be returning to the world she had abandoned, facing the kind of life-or-death decisions that had broken her confidence and ended her military career. But this time would be different. This time she wouldn't be training students or providing theoretical guidance. This time she would be fighting alongside soldiers who needed her expertise to survive. And this time she would have to prove to herself that Phantom still existed, buried somewhere beneath 4 years of doubt and civilian anonymity. The drive to Fort Bragg took 3 hours and 47 minutes. Emma spent every minute of it remembering who she used to be and trying to find the courage to become that person again. Because somewhere in Afghanistan, Jake Morrison was running out of time. The C-130 transport aircraft cut through the thin air above the Hindu Kush Mountains, carrying Emma Blackwood back into a world she had spent 4 years trying to forget. The cargo compartment was cramped and cold, filled with the familiar sounds of military aviation that brought back a flood of memories from her operational days. Across from her sat Colonel Harrison, who had insisted on accompanying the mission despite being well past the age for combat deployments. "Talk to me about the tactical situation," Emma said, studying the intelligence briefings on her tablet. The documents painted a grim picture of Jake Morrison's predicament. Harrison pulled up a satellite image on his own device. Morrison's team was conducting a reconnaissance mission targeting a Taliban commander named Hakim Zarif. Intelligence indicated Zarif was meeting with foreign fighters to plan attacks on coalition forces. The operation was supposed to be a simple observation and reporting mission. What went wrong? Everything. The team inserted at 0200 local time yesterday and reached their observation post without incident. But when they began surveillance of the target compound, they realized they had walked into a trap. Zarif knew they were coming. Emma studied the terrain on the satellite imagery. The observation post was situated on a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility of the target area, but it was also isolated and difficult to defend. If the enemy knew the Rangers' location, they could easily surround the position and eliminate the team methodically. How many hostiles are we dealing with? Estimates range from 20 to 30 Taliban fighters plus an unknown number of foreign advisors. But the real problem is the sniper. Intelligence indicates he's a Chechen veteran named Aslan Dudayev, call sign Ayatollah Reaper. He's credited with over 60 confirmed kills against Russian forces, and he's been training Taliban marksmen for the past 2 years. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the aircraft's altitude. She had heard of Aslan Dudayev during her intelligence briefings when she was an active instructor. He was considered one of the most dangerous snipers operating in the region. A man who combined exceptional marksmanship skills with a thorough understanding of psychological warfare. What weapons is he using? Unknown, but based on the range and accuracy of his shots, probably a Russian Ursus or possibly a captured NATO sniper rifle. He's been engaging Morrison's team from distances exceeding 1,500 meters, which suggests he's working with high-quality optics and ammunition. Emma absorbed this information while calculating the tactical implications. A sniper of Dudayev's caliber operating at extreme range with quality equipment would be nearly impossible to locate and engage without sophisticated counter-sniper techniques. Morrison was trapped in a deadly game of cat and mouse with one of the most dangerous marksmen in the world. What assets do we have for support? Limited. The forward operating base can provide helicopter transport and medical evacuation, but air support is restricted due to the proximity of civilian areas. Morrison's team is essentially on their own until we can establish a clear tactical picture. The aircraft began its descent toward Bagram airfield, and Emma felt her stomach tighten with anticipation and anxiety. In 30 minutes, she would be on the ground in Afghanistan preparing to guide Jake Morrison through the most dangerous situation of his military career. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but for the first time in 4 years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Bagram airfield buzzed with the controlled chaos of combat operations. Emma followed Harrison across the tarmac to a waiting Black Hawk helicopter, its rotors already turning in preparation for immediate departure. The crew chief briefed them on the flight plan as they strapped in 47 minutes to forward operating base Chapman, then ground transport to the communications center, where Emma would establish contact with Morrison's team. As the helicopter lifted off and banked toward the mountains, Emma reviewed Morrison's personnel file. He had recycled through Ranger training after being dismissed from her program, graduating third in his class and earning assignment to the 75th Ranger Regiment. His deployment record showed steady progression through increasingly responsible positions, culminating in his current role as team leader for reconnaissance operations. The young man she had remembered as uncertain and overeager had apparently matured into a competent soldier. But competence might not be enough against Aslan Dudayev. FOB Chapman sat in a valley surrounded by peaks that reached 12,000 feet above sea level. The base was small and austere, designed to support special operations teams conducting missions in the mountainous border regions between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Emma's first impression was of sandbags, razor wire, and the constant tension that came with being surrounded by hostile territory. Major David Kane met them at the landing zone. He was a compact man in his 30s, with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent significant time in combat zones. His handshake was firm, but Emma noticed the stress lines around his eyes. Ma'am, I'm the operations officer here. We've got a secure communications link established with Morrison's team, but the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Kane led them to the operations center, a reinforced building filled with radio equipment and computer terminals displaying real-time intelligence data. The atmosphere was tense with officers and enlisted personnel monitoring multiple communications channels and updating tactical displays with information from various sources. Give me the current status, Emma requested. Kane pulled up a detailed map on the main display screen. Morrison's team consists of 8 Rangers initially. They're positioned here, he indicated a point on the map approximately 12 kilometers northeast of here. Since yesterday morning, they've sustained 4 killed in action and 3 wounded. The enemy sniper has been systematically engaging them from multiple positions, preventing any movement or evacuation. Emma studied the terrain around Morrison's position. The observation post was situated on high ground with excellent fields of view, but it was also exposed to fire from several directions. The enemy had clearly planned this operation carefully, using Morrison's team as bait to draw in additional forces. What communication capabilities do they have? Limited. Their primary radio was damaged in the initial attack, so we're communicating through Morrison's personal emergency radio. Battery life is estimated at 6 hours maximum. 6 hours. Emma felt the familiar pressure of time constraints that characterize all combat operations. Every decision she made would have to be fast and accurate, with no opportunity for second-guessing or extended analysis. Get me Morrison on the radio. The communications specialist handed her a headset, and Emma heard the distinctive crackling of a satellite radio connection. When Morrison's voice came through, she was struck by how calm he sounded despite his desperate situation. "This is Phantom," she transmitted using her old call sign without thinking. "Morrison, what's your current status?" "Phantom." Morrison's voice carried surprise and something that might have been relief. "Ma'am, I didn't know you were still active duty." "I'm not. I'm here as a civilian consultant. Now give me your tactical situation." Morrison's report was professional and concise. His team was positioned in a rocky outcropping that provided some cover from direct fire, but they were completely exposed to observation from higher elevations. The enemy sniper had been engaging them sporadically throughout the night and morning, taking carefully aimed shots designed to wound rather than kill outright. "He's playing with us," Morrison explained. "Every shot is calculated to cause maximum psychological impact. He's trying to break our morale before he finishes us off." Emma recognized the psychological warfare tactics Morrison was describing. Aslan Dudayev was not simply trying to eliminate the Rangers. He was using them as psychological weapons against coalition forces in the region. Every minute Morrison's team remained trapped would demonstrate that even elite American soldiers could be hunted and killed with impunity. "Morrison, I need you to describe the terrain around your position in detail. Focus on any location where a sniper might establish a hide site with clear lines of sight to your position." For the next 20 minutes, Morrison provided a detailed description of the tactical environment. Emma used this information to build a mental picture of the battlefield, identifying potential sniper positions and planning counter-sniper techniques. The challenge was enormous. Dudayev could be operating from any one of dozens of locations, and he had the advantage of mobility, while Morrison's team was pinned down in a static position. "Phantom, I need to tell you something," Morrison said during a brief pause in the tactical discussion, "about what happened 4 years ago at Fort Bragg. I know my mistake contributed to Martinez getting wounded, and I know you lost your position because of it." Emma felt a tightness in her chest. "Morrison, this is not the time for personal conversations." "Ma'am, it is the time. Because I need you to know that I've thought about that day every single day for 4 years. I've studied atmospheric ballistics, environmental effects, everything I got wrong. And I need you to trust that I won't make the same mistakes again." Emma looked around the operations center, aware that Major Kane and his staff were listening to every word of the conversation. This was not how she had envisioned their first contact after 4 years, but Morrison was right about one thing. Trust was essential for the partnership they were about to form. "Copy that, Morrison. Now let's focus on getting you and your team home alive." Emma spent the next hour analyzing intelligence reports and building a tactical plan for engaging Aslan Dudayev. The challenge was that traditional counter-sniper techniques relied on mobility and superior optics, neither of which Morrison's team possessed. Instead, she would have to use deception and psychological warfare to turn Dudayev's own tactics against him. "Morrison, here's what we're going to do," she transmitted. "You're going to create a decoy target designed to draw Dudayev into taking a shot that exposes his position. Once we identify his location, you'll have one opportunity to engage him before he relocates. Phantom, with respect, we've already tried using decoys. He's too experienced to fall for obvious tricks. This won't be obvious. You're going to use yourself as the decoy." The radio channel was silent for several long seconds. When Morrison responded, his voice was carefully controlled. "Explain." Emma outlined her plan. Morrison would expose himself to enemy observation in a way that appeared accidental, but was actually carefully calculated to present Dudayev with an irresistible target. The key was making the exposure look like a mistake born of desperation rather than a deliberate trap. "The timing has to be perfect," Emma explained. "You'll have approximately 4 seconds from the time Dudayev fires until you can return fire. If you miss that window, he'll relocate, and you'll never find him again." "And if he doesn't miss his shot at me," Emma paused, considering her words carefully, "then you'll be dead, but your team will know exactly where he's shooting from. Sometimes that's the best tactical option available." Again, silence on the radio. Emma knew that Morrison was weighing the risks of her plan against the certainty of slow elimination if his team remained in their current position. It was the kind of impossible decision that separated good soldiers from great ones. "I'll need 15 minutes to brief my team and get into position," Morrison finally transmitted. "Copy, Morrison." "Yes, ma'am." 4 years ago, you were a Ranger candidate with good instincts but limited experience. Today, you're a combat veteran and team leader. Trust your training and trust yourself. I'll guide you through the technical aspects, but you're the one who has to execute under fire." "Roger that, Phantom. Morrison out." Emma removed her headset and found Major Kane watching her with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, what you're asking Morrison to do is essentially a suicide mission. Even if he spots the enemy's sniper's muzzle flash, the chances of accurately engaging a target at extreme range while under direct fire are minimal." Emma understood Kane's concerns, but she also understood the mathematics of their situation. Morrison's team was trapped with limited supplies and no prospect of rescue. Every hour they remained in position increased the likelihood that Dudayev would eliminate them all. The plan as she had outlined was dangerous, but it was their only realistic chance of breaking the tactical stalemate. "Major, what's the timeline for conventional rescue operations?" Kane consulted his tactical display. "Minimum 12 hours for a ground assault force to reach Morrison's position, assuming we can suppress enemy air defenses. Air assault would be faster, but we'd be flying helicopters into a known sniper overwatch position." "How many casualties would you expect from a conventional rescue operation?" Kane's expression darkened. "Significant. Dudayev has had time to prepare the battlefield. He'll be expecting rescue operations, and he'll have contingencies planned for every approach route." Emma nodded. Military mathematics were harsh but clear. A high-risk counter-sniper operation with Morrison as the primary operator was actually the lowest casualty option available, even if it meant putting one soldier's life at maximum risk. The 15 minutes passed slowly. Emma used the time to review ballistic tables and atmospheric data, calculating firing solutions for the engagement ranges Morrison would be facing. The environmental conditions were challenging high-altitude variable wind patterns and extreme temperature fluctuations between day and night. Any shot Morrison attempted would push his equipment and training to their limits. "Phantom, this is Morrison. We're in position and ready to execute." Emma felt her pulse quicken. Everything they had planned for the past 2 hours was about to be tested under the most demanding conditions imaginable. "Copy, Morrison. Remember, the key to this operation is patience. Dudayev will be watching for signs of deception, so you have to sell the exposure as genuine desperation." "Understood. What's my timeline?" Emma consulted the tactical display. "Local sunrise is in 43 minutes. That's when Dudayev will have optimal lighting conditions for a precision shot. I want you to begin your approach 37 minutes from now." For the next 30 minutes, Emma monitored radio traffic and intelligence reports while mentally rehearsing the operation. She had trained dozens of snipers to execute similar missions, but this was the first time in 4 years that she had provided tactical guidance for an active combat operation. The weight of responsibility was familiar and terrifying. Phantom Morrison, beginning approach now. Emma watched the digital clock on her console counting down seconds as Morrison moved into position for what might be the last tactical decision of his military career. Through the radio, she could hear his controlled breathing and the subtle sounds of movement across rocky terrain. Contact, Morrison transmitted. I can see movement in the target area. Looks like Dudayev is repositioning for a better angle of attack. Emma felt her chest tighten. If Dudayev was moving, it meant he had identified Morrison's location and was preparing to engage. The timing of their operation was about to become critical. Morrison, how's your firing position? Solid. I've got clear lines of sight to 3 potential sniper hides, and my rifle is zeroed for the expected engagement range. Copy. On my mark, expose yourself to the primary target area for exactly 4 seconds, then immediately move to your firing position. Do not hesitate, do not second guess. As soon as you see muzzle flash engage, Emma took a deep breath and began the countdown that would determine whether Jake Morrison went home to his wife and daughter or became another casualty in the endless war in Afghanistan. Execute in 5, 4, 3, 2, bin, mark. Through the radio, Emma heard Morrison moving across his position, deliberately exposing himself to enemy observation. The seconds stretched endlessly as she waited for the sound of incoming fire or Morrison's engagement report. Then she heard the sharp crack of a high-powered rifle followed immediately by Morrison's voice. Muzzle flash identified. Engaging now. Morrison's rifle fired the distinctive sound of an American M110 sniper rifle cutting through the mountain air. Emma held her breath waiting for the impact report that would determine the success or failure of their operation. Hit! Morrison transmitted, and Emma felt a surge of relief that lasted exactly 2 seconds before Morrison's next transmission. Target down, but he's not alone. I count at least 3 additional shooters moving to support positions. We're about to be in a world of hurt. Emma realized that they had been partially successful, but had also walked into Aslan Dudayev's final trap. The Chechen sniper had anticipated their counter-sniper operation and had prepared a response that would eliminate Morrison's team, even if he himself was neutralized. Morrison, can you identify the additional threats? Negative. They're using smoke and terrain masking to conceal their movements. But based on their tactics, these aren't local Taliban. These are trained snipers working as a coordinated team. Emma felt the tactical situation shifting in real time. Instead of facing one exceptional sniper, Morrison was now confronting a hunter-killer team with multiple members and coordinated fire control. It was a threat that no single soldier could counter successfully. Phantom, Morrison continued, I need you to know something. I got Dudayev, but he managed to get one shot off before I hit him. It's heading right toward. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Emma staring at the silent radio with growing dread. Either Morrison's radio had failed at the worst possible moment, or Aslan Dudayev's final shot had found its target. Morrison, respond, Emma called. Morrison, this is Phantom. Respond immediately. Nothing but static. Major Kane leaned forward. Could be atmospheric interference from the mountains. These radio communications are always unreliable. But Emma knew better. She had heard something in Morrison's voice during his last transmission, a tone that soldiers used when they were about to deliver terrible news. Dudayev's final shot had hit something or someone important, and Morrison was dealing with the consequences. Get me alternate communication with Morrison's team, Emma ordered. Radio, satellite, smoke signals, whatever works. The communications specialist worked frantically to reestablish contact, while Emma stared at the tactical display, watching the red icons representing Morrison's team remain motionless in their isolated position. For all she knew, Jake Morrison was bleeding out on a mountainside 12 kilometers away, just like Staff Sergeant Martinez had 4 years earlier. But this time, Emma was not going to accept failure as inevitable. This time, she was going to prove that Phantom could still save the soldiers who needed her most. The question was whether Jake Morrison would be alive when she reached him. The silence from Morrison's radio stretched for 7 agonizing minutes before a weak transmission finally crackled through the speakers in the operations center at FOB Chapman. But it wasn't Jake Morrison's voice that came through the static. It was Corporal Danny Williams Morrison's radio operator, and the strain in his voice told Emma everything she needed to know about the situation. Phantom, this is Bravo 7. We've got a man down. Morrison took a round through the chest. He's alive but unconscious, and we're taking fire from multiple positions. Emma felt the familiar cold weight of combat decision-making settle over her. Morrison was wounded, possibly dying, and his team was trapped in an increasingly desperate tactical situation. Every choice she made in the next few minutes would determine whether any of them survived to see their families again. Bravo 7, this is Phantom. Give me Morrison's medical status and tactical situation. Williams's report painted a grim picture. Aslan Dudayev's final shot had struck Morrison's center mass, but his body armor had absorbed most of the impact. He was unconscious with a probable concussion and broken ribs, but there was no visible external bleeding. The immediate threat to his life was not the wound itself, but the fact that his team was now leaderless while facing coordinated attacks from multiple enemy snipers. How many hostiles are you tracking? Emma asked. At least 4 shooters in overwatch positions plus movement from ground assault elements. Ma'am, they're coordinating this like a military operation. These aren't local Taliban fighters. Emma studied the intelligence displays around her, trying to understand what Morrison's team had stumbled into. The presence of multiple trained snipers working in coordination suggested that this was not a random ambush, but a carefully planned operation targeting American Special Operations Forces. Major Kane approached her with a concerned expression. Phantom, I'm receiving reports from other units in the region. We've got 3 more teams that have gone silent in the past 12 hours, all in this general area. I think we're looking at a coordinated operation designed to eliminate our reconnaissance capabilities. Emma absorbed this information while monitoring the radio traffic from Morrison's team. If Kane was correct, then Morrison's Rangers had been deliberately drawn into a trap that was much larger than a simple ambush. Someone had leaked operational information to the enemy, allowing them to position assets to systematically eliminate American forces. Williams, she transmitted, I need you to assume team leadership and prepare for immediate tactical movement. Your current position is compromised, and you cannot remain there. Ma'am, Morrison is unconscious, and we've got 2 other wounded. We can't move fast enough to evade pursuit, and we don't have enough ammunition for a sustained firefight. Emma understood the tactical mathematics. A team of Rangers burdened with casualties could not outrun pursuing enemies in mountainous terrain. Traditional escape and evasion tactics would not work in this situation. Instead, they would need to use deception and misdirection to break contact with superior forces. Williams, here's what we're going to do. You're going to split your team into 2 elements. The first element will create a diversion to draw enemy attention, while the second element moves Morrison and the other casualties to an alternate position. Ma'am, we've only got 5 effective soldiers left. Splitting our force will leave each element vulnerable to being overwhelmed. Copy that, but staying together guarantees that the entire team will be eliminated systematically. Sometimes the only way to save everyone is to risk losing some. Emma began outlining a complex tactical plan that would require precise timing and exceptional courage from Morrison's remaining team members. The key was using the enemy's superior numbers against them by creating multiple apparent targets and forcing them to divide their attention. But as she detailed the plan, her radio operator interrupted with urgent information. Ma'am, I'm receiving a priority transmission from CENTCOM. You need to take this call immediately. Emma accepted the secure connection and found herself speaking with General Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer for special operations in the Afghanistan theater. The conversation was brief and devastating. Phantom, I'm going to be direct with you. The operation that Morrison's team was conducting was compromised before it began. We have credible intelligence indicating that classified mission details were leaked to enemy forces by someone with high-level access to our operational plans. Emma felt her chest tighten. General, are you telling me that Morrison's team was deliberately sent into an ambush? I'm telling you that someone wanted that team eliminated and they used classified information to arrange it. We're conducting an investigation, but right now your priority needs to be getting those soldiers out of there alive. The secure connection ended, leaving Emma staring at the radio equipment with a growing sense of horror. Jake Morrison and his team were not just facing an enemy ambush. They were victims of betrayal by someone within the American military structure. The tactical situation was not just difficult, it was intentionally impossible. Major Kane, Emma said quietly, I need you to initiate a communications lockdown. No information about Morrison's team or our rescue efforts goes outside this operations center without my personal authorization. Kane understood immediately. You think we've got a leak here? I think someone wanted Morrison's team dead and they might be monitoring our communications to ensure the mission succeeds. Emma returned to the radio and re-established contact with Morrison's team. But instead of transmitting her tactical plan over the potentially compromised communication system, she decided to take a much more direct approach to solving their problem. Williams, what's your team's ammunition status? We've got maybe 200 rounds of small arms ammunition left, plus 3 magazines for Morrison's sniper rifle. Not enough for a sustained engagement. Copy. In 30 minutes, you're going to get resupply and reinforcement. I'm coming to you personally. The operations center fell silent. Major Kane stared at Emma with an expression of complete disbelief. Ma'am, you're a civilian consultant. You can't authorize yourself for a combat mission. Emma looked around the room at the military personnel who had been listening to her conversation with Morrison's team. These were professional soldiers who understood the mathematics of combat, and they all knew that conventional rescue operations would result in significant casualties. Major, how long would it take to organize a ground assault to reach Morrison's position? Minimum 8 hours to plan and execute, assuming we can suppress enemy air defenses. How many casualties would you expect from that operation? Kane consulted his tactical displays. Given the enemy's preparation and coordination, probably significant. Double-digit friendly casualties with no guarantee of successfully extracting Morrison's team. And how long can Morrison's team hold their current position? Based on their ammunition and medical supplies, maybe 4 hours. Emma nodded. The tactical mathematics were clear. Conventional rescue operations would take too long and cost too many lives. The only viable option was a direct intervention by someone with the skills to neutralize the enemy sniper team and guide Morrison's Rangers to safety. Major, I'm going to need transportation to Morrison's position, and I'm going to need it immediately. Ma'am, I cannot authorize a civilian to participate in active combat operations. Emma walked to the equipment locker where her personal gear was stored and began putting on body armor and combat equipment. She had not worn this gear in 4 years, but it felt familiar and comfortable, like putting on an old uniform that still fit perfectly. Major, I'm not asking for authorization. I'm informing you of my intentions. You can support this operation or you can try to stop me, but Morrison's team is running out of time. Kane watched her check her weapons and communication equipment with obvious professional competence. After 30 seconds of consideration, he made a decision that probably violated several regulations but demonstrated perfect tactical judgment. What do you need for transportation? Fast helicopter with minimal crew. I want to insert as close to Morrison's position as possible without alerting the enemy to our approach. Kane began making arrangements for immediate helicopter transport while Emma completed her equipment checks. She was carrying a lightweight sniper rifle and additional ammunition for Morrison's team medical supplies and communication equipment that would allow her to coordinate with FOB Chapman during the operation. But as she prepared to leave the operations center, Emma's radio operator called her back. Ma'am, I'm receiving another priority transmission. This one is unusual. Emma accepted the connection and heard a voice that she didn't recognize speaking with a slight accent that suggested European origin. Phantom, this is someone who has been waiting to speak with you for a very long time. Identify yourself. My name is Robert Kane. I'm the CIA liaison who provided the intelligence for Morrison's mission. I think you and I need to have a conversation. Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. CIA personnel did not typically contact military operators directly during active missions unless something had gone seriously wrong. Kane, if you've got intelligence relevant to Morrison's situation, transmit it through proper channels. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Phantom. You see, I was the one who arranged for Morrison's CIA team to walk into that ambush. And I'm the one who's been waiting 4 years for the opportunity to watch you fail again. Emma's mind raced through the implications of what she was hearing. Robert Kane was not just a CIA liaison. He was the source of the intelligence leak that had compromised Morrison's mission. But his reference to 4 years suggested a personal connection to the incident that had ended her military career. Who are you, Kane? I'm someone who lost a brother because of your incompetence 4 years ago. Staff Sergeant Martinez was my younger brother, and he spent 8 months in military hospitals because you provided tactical guidance that got him shot. Emma felt the world tilt around her. Robert Kane was Martinez's brother, a CIA operative who had used his position and access to classified information to arrange revenge against the woman he blamed for his brother's injuries. Cain Martinez recovered fully from his wounds. He completed his deployment because he was too proud to accept a medical discharge. But the nerve damage in his shoulder ended his military career and destroyed his dream of becoming a career soldier. You did that to him, Phantom. Your arrogance and your need to play hero ruined his life. Emma understood now why Morrison's mission had been compromised and why her attempts to rescue his team were proving so difficult. Robert Cain had spent 4 years planning an elaborate revenge operation designed to force her to experience the same sense of helplessness and failure that had driven her from the military. What do you want, Cain? I want you to watch Jake Morrison die the same way Martinez almost died. I want you to provide tactical guidance that fails, and I want you to live with the knowledge that your advice got good soldiers killed. Then we'll be even. Emma looked around the operations center at the military personnel who were preparing for her rescue mission. They had no idea that they were participating in an elaborate psychological warfare operation designed to destroy her personally. Cain Morrison's team has nothing to do with what happened 4 years ago. They're innocent soldiers who deserve the chance to go home to their families. Martinez was an innocent soldier too. That didn't stop you from treating him like a training exercise. Emma closed her eyes and tried to think through the tactical implications of Cain's revelation. If he had arranged Morrison's ambush, then he probably had contingency plans for any rescue operation she might attempt. Flying into Morrison's position would likely mean walking into another trap. But Morrison and his team were still trapped and running out of time. Whether Cain's motivations were personal or not, American soldiers were dying while she debated options in a secure operations center. Cain, I'm going to make you an offer. I'll come to Morrison's position personally and provide whatever tactical guidance you want me to provide. If I fail and Morrison dies, you get your revenge. But if I succeed in saving his team, you call off your operation and surrender to military authorities. That's an interesting proposition, Phantom. But what makes you think I would honor such an agreement? Because revenge isn't worth anything if it doesn't prove your point. If I save Morrison despite your best efforts to stop me, then you'll know that the incident 4 years ago was not a result of incompetence or arrogance. You'll know that sometimes good soldiers get hurt or killed despite everyone's best efforts, and that blame is not always the same thing as responsibility. Cain was quiet for several long seconds. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different tone, less certain and more thoughtful. Very well, Phantom. Come to Morrison's position. I'll be waiting. The transmission ended, leaving Emma alone with the knowledge that she was flying into the most dangerous tactical situation of her career. But for the first time in 4 years, she felt completely certain about what she had to do. 20 minutes later, Emma was airborne in a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter flying through mountain valleys toward Jake Morrison's position. The flight took 37 minutes, during which she reviewed intelligence reports and planned her approach to the tactical situation. The insertion was conducted at a landing zone 2 kilometers from Morrison's position, close enough to reach his team quickly, but far enough to avoid immediate enemy observation. As the helicopter lifted off and disappeared into the mountain terrain, Emma found herself alone in hostile territory for the first time in 4 years. Moving through the rocky terrain toward Morrison's position, Emma felt her operational instincts returning. Every sound, every shadow, every change in the wind carried tactical significance. She was no longer a civilian security consultant. She was Phantom, the sniper instructor who had trained dozens of soldiers to survive in exactly this kind of environment. She reached Morrison's position after 43 minutes of careful movement through terrain that provided cover from enemy observation. What she found was worse than she had expected based on radio reports. Morrison was conscious but clearly in significant pain from his chest wound. 2 other Rangers were wounded seriously enough to limit their mobility. The team's defensive position was deteriorating rapidly under pressure from coordinated enemy attacks. Phantom, Morrison said when he saw her, "I can't believe you actually came. I told you I'd get you home to your wife and daughter. That's still the plan." Emma quickly assessed the tactical situation while providing medical attention to Morrison and the other wounded Rangers. The enemy had established overwatch positions that covered all obvious escape routes from their current location. Any attempt to move would expose them to deadly accurate sniper fire from multiple directions. But as she studied the terrain through her binoculars, Emma noticed something that gave her hope. The enemy positions were perfectly situated to cover conventional escape routes, but there was one approach that they had not anticipated directly toward the enemy's main position. Morrison, how do you feel about taking the fight directly to Kane and his people? Morrison managed a weak smile despite his injuries. Ma'am, at this point, I'd follow you straight into hell if it meant getting my team home alive. Emma spent the next 30 minutes developing a plan that violated every principle of conventional tactics while adhering perfectly to the psychological warfare principles she had learned during her operational career. Instead of trying to evade the enemy, she would attack them directly using their own expectations against them. The plan required Morrison to make one final sniper shot, despite his injuries, in the compromised position of his team. But this shot would not be aimed at an enemy sniper. It would be aimed at Robert Kane himself. Morrison, I need you to understand something, Emma explained as she helped him prepare his rifle for what would be the most important shot of his career. Kane arranged this entire operation to prove that I'm a failure as an instructor and as a soldier. The only way to save your team is to prove him wrong. What do you need me to do? I need you to make a shot that's technically impossible under these conditions at a range that exceeds your equipment's capabilities while wounded and under enemy fire. I need you to show Kane that the soldiers I trained are capable of miracles when they have to be. Morrison checked his rifle and adjusted his position to achieve the best possible shooting angle, given their limited options. What's the range to target? Emma had calculated the ballistic solution during her approach to their position. 2,300 meters uphill is shot with variable wind conditions and atmospheric pressure variations due to altitude. Ma'am, that's beyond the effective range of my rifle. I know, but Kane doesn't know that we know where he is, and he doesn't expect us to take a shot that has virtually no chance of success. Sometimes the impossible shot is the only one that works. Emma guided Morrison through the ballistic calculations while providing encouragement and technical expertise. This was what she had been born to do, what she had trained for throughout her military career. Not just teaching soldiers to shoot accurately, but teaching them to achieve the impossible when lives depended on it. Morrison, when you take this shot, you're not just shooting for yourself or your team. You're shooting for every soldier who's ever been let down by their leadership, every military family that's ever lost someone to politics or incompetence or bad intelligence. Make this shot count. Morrison controlled his breathing and settled into the natural respiratory pause that every precision shooter used. Emma watched through her binoculars as he made final adjustments to his scope and prepared to engage a target that was technically beyond his capabilities. Wind check, she said quietly. Variable 8 to 12 miles per hour from the northwest. Atmospheric pressure. Estimated 28.4 inches of mercury at target altitude. Temperature differential between firing position and target. Approximately 15 degrees Fahrenheit target area colder due to elevation. Emma nodded. Morrison had absorbed every lesson she had ever taught about long-range shooting under adverse conditions. Now she would find out whether 4 years of guilt and self-doubt had damaged her ability to guide soldiers through life or death decisions. You're cleared to engage, Morrison. Make me proud. Morrison fired and Emma tracked the bullet's flight path through her binoculars. At 2,300 meters, the projectile took nearly 3 seconds to reach its target, an eternity in combat terms. During those 3 seconds, Emma held her breath and prayed to whatever God watched over soldiers and snipers. The bullet struck Robert Kane center mass, dropping him instantly. Through her binoculars, Emma could see the enemy sniper team's coordinated positions beginning to collapse as their command structure disintegrated. Hit, Morrison reported, and Emma heard pride and relief in his voice. Target down. But even as Kane's operation fell apart, Emma realized that their tactical situation was far from resolved. The remaining enemy snipers were still in position, still capable of preventing Morrison's team from reaching safety. The impossible shot had been successful, but it was only the first step toward getting everyone home alive. Morrison, can you make 2 more shots like that one? Morrison checked his remaining ammunition. I've got 4 rounds left, but I don't know if I can maintain accuracy. The chest wound is affecting my breathing and stability. Emma made a decision that surprised even herself. Give me your rifle. I'll take the remaining shots. Morrison looked at her with confusion. Ma'am, you haven't fired a precision rifle in 4 years, and you're not technically military personnel. Morrison, I've been Phantom for 28 years. I was Phantom before I ever put on a uniform, and I'll be Phantom until the day I die. Hand me that rifle. Emma took Morrison's M110 and settled into a shooting position that felt as natural as breathing. The rifle was different from what she had used during her operational career, but the fundamental principles of precision shooting are unchanged. Distance when atmospheric conditions target movement and the simple mathematics of ballistics. She engaged the remaining enemy snipers with methodical precision, each shot carefully calculated and executed under the kind of pressure that separated good soldiers from legends. By the time she finished, 3 more enemy snipers were down, and Morrison's team had a clear route to the extraction landing zone. All targets neutralized, Emma reported to Phoebe Chapman. Request immediate helicopter extraction for 8 personnel, 4 walking wounded. The extraction went smoothly with Morrison's team reaching safety exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes after Emma had first established contact with them from the operations center. As the helicopter lifted off and banked toward Phoebe Chapman, Emma felt a sense of completion that she had not experienced since leaving the military 4 years earlier. But the mission was not quite finished. As they approached the forward operating base, Emma's radio crackled with one final transmission. Phantom, this is Martinez. Emma's blood ran cold. Staff Sergeant Martinez, the soldier she had tried to save 4 years ago, the man whose brother had arranged Morrison's ambush in pursuit of revenge. Martinez, how are you on this frequency? I've been monitoring Robert's communications for the past 6 months. I knew he was planning something, and I've been trying to find a way to stop him. Emma absorbed this information while watching the landing zone approach. Martinez, what do you want me to know? I want you to know that what happened 4 years ago was not your fault. Robert was consumed by guilt because he wasn't there when I got wounded, and he needed someone to blame. You were convenient, but you weren't responsible. Martinez, Phantom, you saved my life. The guidance you provided under impossible conditions gave me a chance that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I completed my recovery, finished my military career, and I'm alive today because you cared enough to do your job under fire. Emma felt 4 years of guilt and self-doubt beginning to dissolve. What happened to your brother? He's in custody and he's going to face military justice for treason. But before they take him away, he wanted me to tell you something. He said that watching you save Morrison's team proved that he was wrong about you. He said you're exactly the kind of soldier the Army needs, and he's sorry for what he put you through. The helicopter touched down at Phoebe Chapman, and Emma helped transfer Morrison and his wounded teammates to the medical facility. As she watched them receive professional care, she realized that she had found what she had been looking for during 4 years of civilian life, the proof that she was still the soldier she had always been. 3 weeks later, Emma Blackwood stood in front of a classroom full of Ranger candidates at Fort Bragg, wearing the uniform of a chief warrant officer and the instructor badge she had thought she would never see again. The Army had offered her direct commissioning back into the sniper instructor program, and she had accepted immediately. Long-range precision shooting, she began addressing the young soldiers who would carry forward the traditions of the Army Rangers, is not about perfect conditions or ideal equipment. It's about making impossible shots when lives depend on it. The students listened with rapt attention, knowing that they were being taught by someone who had proven herself under the most demanding conditions imaginable. 4 years ago, I thought I had lost the ability to guide soldiers through life or death decisions. I thought that one failure had destroyed my credibility as an instructor and as a soldier. I was wrong about that, just like I was wrong about a lot of things. Emma picked up a precision rifle from the demonstration table, the same type of weapon that Morrison had used to save his team, and proved that impossible shots were simply challenges waiting for the right soldier. What I learned is that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. Every shot you miss teaches you something about the next shot you'll make. Every mistake you make in training prepares you for the decisions you'll have to make in combat. One of the students raised his hand. Chief Blackwood, is it true that you made a 2,300-meter shot in Afghanistan? Emma smiled, remembering Morrison's courage and the teamwork that had saved 8 American soldiers. Soldier, I've made a lot of shots in my career, but the most important shots are never the ones you take for yourself. The most important shots are the ones you take for your teammates, for your mission, and for the people who are counting on you to bring everyone home alive. She looked at each student individually, seeing in their faces the same eagerness and uncertainty she had carried as a young soldier. Your job isn't to be perfect. Your job is to be ready, ready to act when others hesitate, ready to take responsibility when others make excuses, ready to make the shot that everyone says is impossible. After class, Emma walked across Fort Bragg to the memorial wall where the names of fallen Rangers were engraved in black granite. She found the section that honored soldiers killed in Afghanistan, running her fingers across names of young men and women who had given their lives in service to their country. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jake Morrison, who was recovering at Walter Reed Medical Center, while his wife and daughter waited for him to come home. Phantom, just wanted you to know that my daughter's middle name is Emma. Figure she should be named after the woman who made sure her daddy came home. Thank you for everything. Morrison. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes as she read the message. For 4 years, she had carried the guilt of thinking she had failed the soldiers who had trusted her with their lives. But standing in front of the memorial wall, holding a message from a soldier who was alive because of her training and guidance, she finally understood what Colonel Harrison had tried to tell her all those years ago. Sometimes good people die despite everyone's best efforts. Sometimes the impossible shot is the only one that works. And sometimes the greatest failure is giving up on yourself when others still believe in you. Emma Blackwood was Phantom again, the sniper instructor who taught soldiers to make impossible shots and bring everyone home alive. She had found her way back to the person she had always been, and she was ready to train the next generation of warriors who would carry forward the traditions of courage, precision, and brotherhood that defined the Army Rangers. The mission continued, the legacy endured, and Phantom was exactly where she belonged,